So we'll have that, and then I will ask everybody to introduce themselves that's on, and then we will we'll get going. And if you have questions, you can ask it in the question box, and then I'll open it. I'll unmute everybody at the end, and we can have more of a conversation then. So Cynthia, you want to get started, and then we'll go from there?
Sure. This is Cynthia Bettner. I'm with the Silvio Conti National Fish and Wildlife Refuge. I'm hearing an echo, so this may sound a little weird.
Perfect.
I work on invasive species in the whole Connecticut River watershed, which includes areas of Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. And I'm on the Massachusetts Invasive Plan Advisory Group.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm going to mute you, and then I'll go Bob Zimmerman if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm here. It's Bob Zimmerman from Brother Coalition in Florence, Massachusetts.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm going to mute you now. And Julie, if you want to go.
Hopefully you guys can hear me. This is Julie Busa. I'm at Mount Holyoke College. I'm the program coordinator for restoration ecology, and I also coordinate our water chestnut removal there. Perfect.
Thank you. And Nancy, you're on the phone, so hopefully that'll work. So go for it. Nancy, is your phone muted maybe? Okay, well, maybe Nancy's phone's not letting her in or something. So I will go ahead and get started, and then we can go from here. So I'm gonna give you a little update on EDDMapS, where we are, where we're going, and some other stuff nationally that is related to invasive species data and data sharing. I am at the University of Georgia Center for Invasive Species and Ecosystem Health. We go by Bugwood. A lot of people know us as Bugwood. We were the Bugwood Network until February of 2008. University is a land grant institution, and my position, as well as my other faculty in our center and our group, is all outreach extension focused. And what we try to do, we've kind of found a niche, and what we do is try to work across boundaries to provide ways to combine science with technology and do as much of that and make it freely as available as possible. So I am the Associate Director of the Center. My focus is on invasive species and information technology. I'm also a faculty member within the Warren L. School of Forestry and Natural Resources. I am Vice Chair of the National Invasive Species Council and Chair of the North American Invasive Species Network. And I've been with the university 16 years is actually not correct. I should have fixed that, for over 18 years now. And so our center is a partnership between forestry and agriculture, which are in two different schools within the University of Georgia. And our center really tries, our logos, 4 areas coming together, and our center really tries to bring together different disciplines: forestry, agriculture, invasive species, as well as information technology, with kind of the tagline of utilizing partnerships and information technology to advance invasive species, forestry, and ag education. Here's our group now. Dave Moorhead, who's a forester, is one of our co-directors. Mike Tays is our other co-director. Then myself as associate director. Joe LaForest, who is the other associate director, and he handles a lot of the IPM issues. He's co-director of the Southern IPM Center as well as being part of our group. Karen Rollins is our invasive species outreach coordinator. Rebecca Wallace is the EDDMapS data coordinator. Selena McAllister is our office manager. And then what's really core is the rest of our team. And one of our team members, Adam, is new and not pictured on the slide. But Adam's our Android programmer. And then Jordan Daniels, our iPhone programmer. Liz Moss, who's actually got a master's in forestry, but she's been doing a lot of website and outreach development. Bilal Bush is our primary web programmer. And then Sarah Jean is the one that kind of makes everything look good at the end of the day, and does a lot of the high level web development stuff. I would say 100% of our success and what we've been able to do is because of our staff being local, and we're able to fix things very quickly and do projects very quickly. Just as a little bit of a background of how we got into mapping. So Bugwood is really known for pictures. So we started collecting slides years ago. We built photo CDs of these slides that morphed into the Forestry Images database and website, which is now the Bugwood Image Database System, and includes forestry images, invasive.org, IPM images, insect images, weed images. And we have about 250,000 images now that are available through that system. As part of that, and as part of working on forest health, we moved into working with the Forest Service on invasive plants. Jim Miller was one of our main contacts in the South on that. And we built, some tools around these different publications that came out related to invasive species and invasive plants in particular. And I kept, as we put stuff together, going, well, what about maps? Where are the good distribution maps for these species? And the easy answer was, well, just go to plants. Well, yeah, you can go to plants, and on plants you can see state distribution, and sometimes you can see county distributions, but you don't always have the source for that data. Where did it come from originally? So we started looking, and we realized, hey, there's a bunch of databases and a bunch of networks out there. And so how can we make all of these work together? There were also a lot of maps. Sometimes the maps showed different distribution of even common species like Japanese honeysuckle. And this is an example that I like to show when we, the plants database in May. This is what Japanese honeysuckle looked like. And if you go into EDDMapS, I think every county now is reported in the state of Georgia. And when we started doing this, iPain was going strong. iPain, for those of you that have not been around that long, was the Invasive Plant Atlas of New England. It was led by primarily Les Mehrhoff, although there were a lot of others involved. And it was a good model. So we looked at what iPain had done, and we looked at some other systems, and we said, let's build something starting out for the Southeast, and then that's expanded, on this iPain model, so we can have a education-based outreach program where we train volunteers and have that part of it, but then also have the, data aggregation to pull things together. And we looked and we said, okay, well, there's the North American Invasive Plant Mapping Standards that the North American Weed Management Association, now the North American Invasive Species Management Association, had put together. That'll be a good starting point. So we'll use that as the basis for the system. And then we said, well, and what does a lot of people use when it comes to mapping? They use ArcGIS. Well, unless you use ArcGIS on a daily basis, ArcGIS is not the most user-friendly tool there is out there. And so we said, what can we do to make this easier? Well, around this same time was when Google released their Maps API. So Google Maps had been out for a little while, but the Maps API allowed you to overlay data on top of a Google map and really provide more, had the power of that Google Maps interface, but then also have points on top of it. But, we still required, oh, this is what data collection looked like. You went out, you had your GPS unit, you had your notepad, you had your camera, and you collected data about species. So it needed to be easier than that. So we looked at what we needed and we said, okay, well, we need this common operating platform. We need a way to share and pull data together. But then we also need easy electronic reporting so people can report things, especially if it's an ED or R species, and do something quickly with it. So that's where EDDMapS came into play. I mean, EDDMapS came out of early detection and distribution mapping system. So the early detection was the easy electronic reporting. The distribution mapping was the aggregation, and that's where the name came from. And trust me, I've heard it with an S added in between the two D's and the maps. It's been EDDMapS. It's been EDDMapS, but it's EDDMapS. And so our goal has been building this national platform. We started this really in 2005 with the mission of making invasive species mapping easy. And here's just a look at the homepage. The reason, in my opinion, that we've been able to do this is because, we weren't dependent on one pot of money. We have had numerous partners through the years who have funded things at different levels. We owe a lot of credit to the Forest Service for really supporting us at the national level. But then if it wasn't for these other partners, the Park Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, Corps of Engineers, NEFA, APHIS, as well as smaller groups like the Nature Conservancy, the Invasive Plant Control Company, and even state groups like Montana Department of Ag, Minnesota Natural Resources, and Florida Fish and Wildlife, EDDMapS would not be where it is today, because EDDMapS is a bunch of little projects that are built on the same platform. So when a new tool is needed to be developed, that tool is implemented not only for the group we're developing it for, but all of the other projects as well. And so now EDDMapS works across the U.S. I will say Hawaii is really the place where we don't have very much activity, but across the rest of the United States, either there is a network that's working through, CEDN is the Southeast Network, and it's these red states here. Florida, because of some of their wildlife issues, kind of has its own thing and its own app. Across the western states, most all the western states are using the EDDMapS West platform. In the Great Lakes region, Midwest region, they're using Glendon or EDDMapS Midwest. And then through the Mid-Atlantic states, there's the Mid-Atlantic Early Detection Network. And then through a series of events, IPANE became the New England hub for EDDMapS. And IPANE, when the USGS NBII program shut down, IPANE and its entire infrastructure was integrated and archived and integrated into EDDMapS. Texas, Alaska, and California, and to some extent New York, have their own programs, but they've been very good at sharing data back with EDDMapS. In the Alaska and the Texas and even in New York, we actually built smartphone apps that they use. The data either goes into EDDMapS and then is pulled into their system, or goes directly into their system and then shared back with EDDMapS. What we've tried to do with EDDMapS is build a tool for every job. One of my colleagues in my group put this slide together for a presentation he was doing, and I really like it. You have a toolbox, you have these different tools that do different things, and that's really what EDDMapS is. Along the way, smartphones came out. We're 10 years from the release of the first iPhone that really kicked things off. And so over those past 10 years, we started with the I've Got One app in Florida. And since then, we've expanded it and built these regional apps, as well as other apps like Squill on Pigs to report wild pigs in the Pacific Northwest. the landscape alternative for invasive plants app that we built for the Midwest Invasive Plant Network, as well as some others. And in which each app we build, we build in new features, we learn new techniques, and we're able to expand those. So here's the iPain homepage now. iPain would be EDDMapS/iPain would be the portal into the New England side of EDDMapS. We're in the process of phasing out the iPain, the old iPain app, and using the Outsmart Invasives app to service the New England states. The iPain app has not been completely pulled from the store yet, but it will be probably over this summer. All of the information has been integrated into the Outsmart app, and there was a larger user base with the Outsmart app, so it made more sense to make it the primary app for New England. And I'm going to switch over to the web view later if we need to, but just a very simple reporting form on the web to allow you to report things. We've also built tools to make it very easy to bulk upload data. So if you have a data set, you can go log into EDDMapS, upload it into EDDMapS, and then we process it and add it into the database. With the output being maps. I'm not going through and showing a whole bunch of maps right now, but here's the kudzu map. What we've done is broken the map out to show where both we have literature, herbarium records from plants or from BONAP, showing that kudzu's in a county, and then also where we just have observations only. So, just another way of visualizing the data. Here's an example of some Brazilian pepper data in South Florida. Obviously there's a lot of Brazilian pepper that was done through some different surveys, but these points are not just points. When you click on one, you'll see that there are actually some polygons tied in there as well. So, EDDMapS does both points and polygons. It's just we show the points, and then if you want more detail for the records that have polygons, then you click on them and they show up on the map. So the workflow through EDDMapS is we have all these different ways for data to come into EDDMapS, whether it's through the smartphone apps, the web forms, people who've embedded our web forms on other websites, people who are using our API to pull data directly into EDDMapS. And then we have, one-time data dumps. We have data sharing partners. There's the Global Invasive Species Information Network that is mirrored as part of EDDMapS. But basically, all that comes together to create what we consider a new report. Once that new report comes in, then it's run through a verification process. If it's a regulated species, if it's Asian longhorn beetle in a new area, then that's going to be shot off and go to the APHIS and the State Department of Ag folks, so they know about it as quick as possible through that existing structure. If it's not regulated, then we have a series of verifiers to look at different things. Maybe they're at the species level, maybe they're at the location or county level, maybe they're at the state level. If for some reason something comes in, if it's a python in Connecticut, then maybe we don't have a verifier for reptiles in Connecticut yet, but it comes to us, we get a flag, and then we find out who the appropriate person is to look at that record. We've built a tool. This is an early version because the email addresses have been taken out. We've built a tool that's available through the tools and training page on EDDMapS that lets you go in, choose a species, drop a point on the map, and it tells you who the verifiers for that species are, as well as has it been previously reported in that county and what projects and what species it's listed on. Once a record is verified and released, then there's the next part of EDDMapS. And that next part of EDDMapS is when user alerts go out daily. Every morning, there are alerts that go out for any new species that have been reported within an area that you set up to be notified for. We've also had the maps. So you have the state distribution maps, county distribution maps, the Google point maps. All the data is tied into an ArcGIS server. I know I badmouthed ArcGIS at the beginning, but the data is tied into an ArcGIS server, so the data can actually be pulled directly into an ArcGIS client, with the proper permissions on, on the user's end. And then we have the data feeds where the data runs out, where an API is available to pull the data out and go into other data sharing projects. This requires a good bit of IT infrastructure, and we've recently, and trying to just kind of explain it in a simple slide, but everything has been moved to the Amazon cloud. So, we're not dependent on a university network that sometimes can have issues. We're on the biggest hosting provider in the world, and the servers are mirrored, and there's daily backups and everything else related to that. So, and this, everything is on 2 SQL Server databases, as well as a mirror on the ArcGIS. And like I said, that's all on the Amazon cloud. Just to give you a little comparison, in 2010, EDDMapS had 1 million records that covered 1,700 species, and we had 500 users signed up. 500 users or data sources that were part of EDDMapS, and 1,500 that were signed up, registered users. Today, we have over 3 million, with almost 2 million of those being point records. We have data on 5,000 different species, with about 4,000 of those being plants. We have 11,000 different data sources. 35,000 people registered, and we receive about 1 million visitors a year, looking at almost 8 million pages. I wanted to do a comparison on some other projects and the scope of those other projects compared to EDDMapS. There's iNaturalist, there's Project NOAA, iSpot's another one, and iNaturalist has almost 3 million records. Those are actually individual observations. That's a lot of data. But then when you look at Project NOAA or iSpot, the numbers aren't quite as high. Obviously, the gold standard is eBird with 200 million records. But with EDDMapS having 3 million records, and 121,000 of those are coming from smartphone or web individual users reporting those. And to me, that's pretty successful when we're not talking about biodiversity as a whole. We're talking about just invasive species. We've seen a trend of change over the last few years, going from 2012 to 2015, how from where most of our reports were coming in from the web to now we're getting a majority of the reports coming in through either iOS or smartphone, or Android apps. In 2015, we were averaging 41 reports a day, with the most reports in a day being 269. And here's kind of the breakout of where the data was coming in from. Utah is a very strong program, Ontario, and you can go on down. One thing that I will definitely say is the states with, or the provinces with, the most data are the ones that are have a very active outreach program within their state. So you jump to last year. Well, last year, due to some projects that we're doing both in Georgia related to ag pest and Minnesota's DNR's institutionalization of EDDMapS, we jumped up to 152 reports a day, with the most reports being almost 1,500. And so now the distribution looks like this, with Minnesota and Georgia having these huge spikes. And, because Minnesota sent out teams with iPads to collect data, obviously the numbers changed, and the graph is even as near as interesting as it was when you don't look at the 2016 data, because of the change from web to reporting. I'm real interested in citizen science and how that fits in. Although I know a lot of our citizen scientists that report things are actually professionals, more so than the general public. But that's where I went back and said, okay, well, there's a lot of data in EDDMapS, this aggregated data. But interestingly enough, 98% of all reporters in the EDDMapS of the individuals have less than 1,000 records, and 94% have less than 100 records. And this becomes really interesting because even with the iPain data, a good chunk of that data that was collected was done by Les Merhoff or other a handful of users. This is an interesting map showing the distribution of data. The darker the color is where more reports exist in EDDMapS. Now, some of this is tied to the larger counties, but it's just kind of interesting, and where people live. It's a kind of interesting distribution of where the data is. Some of the things we're working on, I like this quote from the Apple CEO, when you decide what the future is, you want to get there as soon as you can. We're working on a tool that will be out at least limited release this summer called EDDMapS Pro. The concept is you're going to choose an area on the map. Let's say it's a county. You're going to download all the data for that county onto your device. And when I say data, you're going to download all the points that are in EDDMapS as well as the background layers. So you will be able to take that iPad, go out in the field, and work with that data set, whether you have cellular coverage or whether you have internet access, whether you have cellular coverage on the device or not. You're going to be able to drop a new point on the map to create a new location and fill out the standard form. You're also going to be able to do a revisit. So you're going to be able to stand in the field, look at the points around you and go, oh, okay, well, that has already been reported. Instead of reporting it again, let me click on it and let me add some more information about that report. And then at the end of the day, you sync this back with the server. You get on Wi-Fi, you sync it back, it updates the new records, puts those in, then you can download the data again onto your device. Because what we're really trying to get to the point of, instead of a whole bunch of red points on the map, we're trying to get to the point where there's a whole bunch of different color points on the map. And those different colors represent different levels of treatment or different levels or different status of the points. So it's not just, here's where all the points are. Well, no, we're treating these. So let's show the ones that are treated in one color. Hey, we ultimately eradicated this. Let's change that color, but let's keep that point. Let's not delete it because, hey, it may come back later. And then also, if you do negative surveys, being able to show that on the map. So we're working toward maps like this. This is an area where the data, there was a lot of treatments done and the data has been updated to show, this change of status of the points. I mentioned some of this earlier, but why has it worked? Well, it's worked because of outreach. It's worked because of people talking about it, groups really buying in, doing trainings, producing informational brochures like Indiana did here, doing things like Utah did, where they say, hey, look for this weed and here's a QR code for you to download in a smartphone app to report this weed. Ontario, I think, does some of the coolest stuff. They have a Map It Monday on Twitter, where every Monday they pick a species and they say, hey, report this to EDDMapS. They also, when Pokemon Go got so big last summer, they said, hey, are you going to be out playing Pokemon Go? While you're out playing Pokemon Go, why don't you keep your eye out for invasive species and report them through EDDMapS? And then Florida, where they have much bigger problems in terms of snakes and lizards, they've got a couple of billboards out there. We've tied everything together with the URL, with the app, all being I've got one, as well as a telephone number. And they've done bumper stickers and other ways to report things. And this is what I really like. So an anaconda was found in St. John's River. Okay, that requires a press release. You've got to tell people about that, is interesting enough. But if you look at this press release, most of the press release is saying, hey, this incident shows how important it is to report sightings of non-native wildlife, including constrictor snakes. If you see non-native wildlife or fish, please report them to this hotline online at I'veGotOne.org, which is the Florida portal into EDDMapS, or using the free smartphone app, I've Got One. And I think this model and this consistency of a message really helps get those, hey, I found this fish that I've never seen before. Is it an invasive? And that's where you really want to be with a program like this. So to summarize some stuff, and then I'm going to open it up. We can talk. I can pull up the website, or I can pull up the app, and I can show you some more details. I wasn't really sure exactly how much you as an audience were familiar with the website or the smartphone app, so I wanted to kind of give an overview and go from there. EDDMapS is available now. It's fast and easy to use. It's free. We're not looking to replace existing working systems that are out there, but to aggregate and share data from those systems. So ultimately, we can have complete distribution, or at least complete county distribution across the U.S. And it's a tool to make your life easier. It's a tool to make it where you can say, hey, go to this website and report that find, and it go to the appropriate people. I think I've said this numerous times. It's a tool that can be used to enhance existing programs. It's up and working now. There's a long-term commitment from the University of Georgia to support this as a key product. I was actually able to get a programmer to help support our infrastructure as part of a legislative request this year, which is going to really help us in terms of long-term sustainability. States don't have to buy in. I think that's really important, and all the data is freely shared. I mentioned this about, there's a lot of different ways to report invasive species. There's a lot of different databases out there, but what we have tried to do is make it where it's easy as possible for the public. Maybe the app's outsmart, and maybe it needs to include some aquatic species, because it's easiest to say everybody use outsmart to report species. Well, once those aquatic species come in, we're going to make sure the folks at USGS with the non-indigenous aquatic species database get those reports and they know about it. But from a user standpoint, there's a lot of argument to be made about having one system, one easy way to report things. But that requires a lot of work. We see EDDMapS as the ultimate aggregator, working across geographical, political, organizational boundaries, but also working at the watershed level all the way up to the continental level. We're continuing to improve the system, adding in new tools to track treatments, stuff like we've seen with the EDDMapS Pro app. My questions to you would be, how can this help your program? Where should we go next? How can this be used by both professionals and citizen scientists better? And where are we going to be 5, 10, 20 years down the road? My summer, once the conference that I'm working on next week is over, is going to be working on some very strong is probably not the best word for it, but working on building some documentation about why data sharing is important. There's some initiatives going on with the Western Governors Association, as well as the Western Weed Coordinating Committee, as well as the workshop that I think y'all have seen the invitation for, that's going to be live broadcast on YouTube next week, where we're really hoping we've got a good number of people coming in from across the country to get some agreements on data sharing and how important that is when you start looking at landscape level management. We've got some commitments now with some of these staff in place to have better data sharing from the federal agencies. And then, as implementation of the national EDRR framework happens, working with the staff in the different agencies to make sure that's as seamless as possible. If you've not seen it, there was a publication that came out about a year ago that was called Safeguarding America's Lands and Waters from Invasive Species, a National Framework for Early Detection and Rapid Response. And this is a very good tool really showing how things should be done moving forward. Included in that was information about, EDDMapS, plants database, USGS, as well as IMAP invasives. We, showed some examples of, a map very similar to the one I showed earlier, showing the different networks that exist and the different tools. The next thing that came out that, in my opinion, strengthened that even more was the National Invasive Species Council Management Plan. And as part of that, and I'm not going to read all of this, but there's some good language in here about a national EDR task force and being able to, have guidance on how EDR can be done, as well as some actions that need to happen as part of that. Designing and implementing a national alert system to enable rapid reporting. Improving the tools and technologies for early detection of and rapid response to invasive species, as well as building the capacity of the federal government to share scientific and technical information to improve improve the rapid sharing of data. Rapid response to invasives. There's a report being generated that's going to be part of a special issue of biological invasions this summer that's really going to look at the capacities of the federal government and as well as some tools out there that can help make this happen. And I think the last thing here is another action as part of that was in order to facilitate the interoperability of data and other information resources relevant to addressing the invasive species issue, establish guidance for data management standards, formats, and protocols. This guidance should target the most relevant high-priority information systems, capture existing standards such as the NA-IPC mapping standards I mentioned earlier, and look at what's already been done as part of tools like the Global Invasive Species Information Network. This action item right here, officially or unofficially, is what a lot of the work next Monday is going to be centered around. So I think that is where we are. The new executive order that was signed in December talks about a lot of this as well. So these are the URLs to get to the apps and to the website. I can switch it off, answer any questions, and then if we need to show something or turn y'all on, and then if we need to if you want me to go into more detail on how the app works or how the website works, I will be glad to. So I can unmute everybody, or you can, I think there's a way to raise your hand and I can unmute you that way. We can just kind of play this by ear and see where we go next. See if it would let me. Bob. Okay, there we go. Well, come on. Okay, Bob, I think you should be unmuted now. Unless you're muted on your end. Bob, maybe are you muted on your end or? Isn't technology great?